You know, our first question came from Ed Morozek, and the issue that he was having is he wanted to know the best procedure to rid his body of surface rust and prepare the body for paint prepare his body for paint. And, you know, I think that's a problem we all run into when we're restoring cars. You know, we want to get all the paint off, but we want to leave it off so we can hammer out dents and, you know, work on all the different aspects before we go to the next stage of dropping the whole car in primer. The problem with that is every time you touch bare metal with your hands, you pass salts and oils that can actually cause corrosion, the humidity, and today we have lots of humidity, so you will see me dust off my glasses a few times here. All that stuff can cause rust on a newly prepped car. And the best way to, you know, preserve a bare metal finish is to actually wipe it down with something that will keep it from rusting. If you had your car media blasted, they're going to wash the whole car in a zinc phosphate wash. This is a very thin zinc phosphate layer that'll keep your car from flashing. Don't expect it to last forever or very long at all. So plan on, you know, if you had your car media blasted, just plan on getting the car in prime. If the whole car is in bare metal, get it in prime. It should be critical that you get the car as quickly as possible. Next, the if you're just stripping your car in your garage, you're just trying to get all the paint off of it, you're trying to get, you know, the finish looking good, you know, you want to make sure if you strip a door, you know, take some automatic transmission fluid, put it on a rag, wipe down the whole door, and then you'll have some protection to keep it from flash rusting. Because essentially when you're stripping something to bare metal, and it's a good idea to get rid of all the 100-year-old paint or 50-year-old paint or however old your car is, but in doing so, you also want to preserve the metal and the surface underneath, and you don't want to cause any problems later on. I know some guys will say, you know, oh, just spray it down with WD-40. Don't like that because there are some silicones and some things in there that can give you some trouble with your paint later on. So kind of just shy away from the WD-40. Next, we got a question coming from Tom regarding proportioning valves, and his question was, can you switch a GM and a Ford proportioning valve? Are they kind of universal fit, or is there really differences between them? And with the proportioning valve, it's not really, you know, on later model cars where they put on there actually a combination valve, and that'll have like a metering valve that goes to the front brakes, and the metering valves, the metering valve serves to actually keep your car during normal braking. Just if you have front disc brakes, if you just put on your brakes lightly, you don't want the nose to dip down or dive. So what the metering valve does is it just restricts a little bit of that flow during normal braking. Now to the back brakes, there's a proportioning valve, and what the proportioning valve does is it only functions when you're doing panic stopping. When you're stopping real hard, you don't want the back brakes to lock up first, because if the back brakes lock up first in a panic stop, it can send the car into a skid. So you want the front brakes to first lock up and then the back brakes, and that way you maintain control as you're doing a real hard stop. And I have heard a lot of guys over the years think that, you know, their brake problems are because of a proportioning valve. Proportioning valve only comes into play during panic stop situations, period. You know, and it's like one of those misunderstood things. People think they need something that they don't. On a drum setup, there usually isn't a proportioning valve. It's just a split. So it's usually disc drum or disc where you have a proportioning valve. and that just regulates your fluid to the rear axle in a panic stop. And as far as GM and Ford, can they be switched? Yeah, you can switch them. You know, most aftermarket kits come with a GM combination valve, and they all function about the same. The idea is to get a proportioning valve that fits the same size and brake setup as your car, a combination valve. So if you have disc drum and it's you know, it's a pony car, it's a Mustang, or if it's a Camaro or something like a car of that same size, because the amount of fluid that goes to the rear brakes, now quickly it gets there, is related in many ways to the size and weight of the car. And if you're really concerned about it a lot, you can always switch over and go do an adjustable proportioning valve to the rear brakes and just eliminate the combination valve completely. I have a question from Joe, who wants to know what's the best glue to use on the upholstery of my classic car. And that's not one answer, Joe. What it is going to be, though, you know, for different things you need different types of adhesives. If you're just gluing foam to foam, you want to use a good foam adhesive. And one that we like in our shop is the Rockford Supply heavy duty spray adhesive. And the reason we like this is it works really good if we're contouring seats, or, you know, sometimes, you know, like in this car, we took out all the springs completely and replaced them with like a firm foam, but we took several blocks of foam and we glued them together. Then we're able to go in and contour that foam with, you know, some of our both like electric knives and grinding wheels, and contoured exactly to the shape we wanted before we put the upholstery on. And what this foam glue does, it gives us a good bond without getting hard. Most contact adhesives will get hard in time, and they'll get kind of brittle and crunchy. So you don't want to just use any contact adhesive, you want to use a foam type adhesive. And then when we're doing things like putting vinyl on door panels, or on maybe the rear sail panel, or, you know, any place where our kick panels where you want it to be a good firm grip, we use an adhesive by DAP, and it's called it's coming to me. It's the Landau Top and Trim adhesive, and you can look that up. Just Landau Top and Trim adhesive, and it's a good vinyl contact cement. You know, it works great for, you know, inside the car, as well as if you've got like running board mats that need to be bonded to. You know, the rubber needs to be bonded to a metal backing. It works great for that. Gives you a real solid attachment, but it will, you know, like most Landau Top or vinyl top adhesives, you know, in time it will get hard and crunchy and everything else. But for those cases, it's the adhesive of choice. So basically, there's just two types of adhesive we use the most in the shop. Okay, I just watched a video of Gary straightening and polishing some stainless, and I noticed he was applying a compound in a stick form to the polishing wheel. Okay, and what Gary was using, and this is some Eastwood stuff. We're not sponsored by Eastwood, but, you know, we do like their products. And basically all this was, you know, and Eastwood has since changed the way their products are packaged. This is how they used to package them, and it was okay. Actually, I like the way they've packaged them now. It's just sort of in a cake, and the cake is a lot easier. You don't have to peel away this cardboard stuff to apply the compound. One little tip, and basically you're going to have different compounds for whatever buffing process you're going to do. And you'll have aggressive emery compounds that you use for removing a lot of material in a big hurry. Or if you just need to do a light polish and a buff, you'll use like a white rouge or a stainless steel. If you're doing stainless steel, they make a stainless steel compound as well. So the idea is to select the compound for the task that you're doing. But the one tip I'm going to give you is these do dry out in time and they get hard. I know a lot of guys I've seen, you go into their shop and they've got a buffing wheel set up and they've got 10 different kinds of compound just laying underneath the buffer. Problem is these compounds, they do dry out in time, and when they do dry out, they become hard as a rock, and you try to transfer that to the buffing wheel, and it's just impossible. So keep your buffing compounds, steaks, or both the sticks or cakes or whatever you have, keep them in a Ziploc bag. And that'll keep them from drying out, and you'll be able, they'll work a lot better if you don't let them dry out like that. Every so often I get questions for late model cars, and while this gentleman has an '86 S10. It's not necessarily a late model, but it's kind of in that range between current drivers and classic cars. And his question was, he was getting his car ready for emissions, and he has flushed the radiator. He has put in new plugs and wires, and wants to know if there's anything else he can do to help him pass an emissions test. And I think it goes to say, regardless of whether you're it's a classic car or not, anything that's going to make your car run better is going to make it run cleaner. And one of the things you can do is to make sure if you have is make sure right before you go in you install a brand new air cleaner. And the reason being, if your air cleaner is at all plugged, it's like putting the choke on just a little bit, and if the more plugged it is, the more rich the fuel will be. The richer the fuel is, the harder your emissions are going to be. So a fresh air cleaner will have your engine breathing, sucking in air and fuel a lot easier, so it will be able to burn it a lot cleaner. Then the one trick I always used before I passed any, and it always worked, would be to take your car out on the freeway and run it for a half hour before you go to the emission station. And that way, everything in the exhaust system, the exhaust manifolds, the exhaust pipes, the mufflers, the catalytic converters, everything's really hot after you've driven it for a half hour on the freeway. So you plan it out so you can pull off the freeway and get into your emission station, and everything's nice and hot under there. You'll have some of your lowest emission readings yet if everything's good and hot. It may be fooling the system a little bit, but it's still an accurate reading of what your emissions are at that point. All right, Bob writes, he has a 1966 El Camino. He says, I see you're a promoter of Eastwood Products. Well, we're not really a promoter of Eastwood Products. Eastwood has a lot of good products we like. And, we have no problem recommending products that we like. And they cater specifically to the car restoration hobby. And anybody that's going to support us are people we want to support, because they have a lot of products that you'd be hunting hard and long and far to find replacements for, and it's good to have them all in one place. So it's we support those people that help support our hobby. Wants to know, can you help? Can you tell me which of their rust converters, rust encapsulators, internal frame spray should be used, and at what conditions? I'm guessing the internal frame spray is the same as the rust encapsulator. I want to treat all the rust under my truck. I used POR 15 about 4 years ago on the rear frame. wire brushed it, treated it as instructed, and I was under the truck and the frame looks like it was never done. This has happened to me and others before, and I will no longer use POR 15. Bob, you know, yeah, Eastwood makes some great products. You know, all their rust encapsulators, rust converters, rust inhibitors work really well. Eastwood also sells POR 15. No single product is good forever, and I don't know exactly what conditions you're using your truck or your El Camino in, but you got to remember the Eastwood or the POR 15 products are not UV safe. They're great for if you're, you tear open a door and you're inside the door and or tear into a quarter panel and you want to get like some kind of protection on that metal underneath before you weld it all up, or even inside doors. We've used it where inside the door panel, the outside door panel's fine. We just want to stabilize all that light rust and stuff inside the car. It's a hard place to get at to do anything with. POR 15's always worked really well. And when it's not exposed to light, it seems to last forever. I've had a bear of a time getting it off on some projects before. So I wouldn't be quick to, throw POR 15 under the bus. Like I said, Eastwood makes great products. If you haven't used theirs, use theirs. They just came out with a new platinum rust encapsulator that I'm dying to try. They say it lasts, 5 times longer, 10 times longer than anything on the market. I don't know this until I've tried it. I have not tried it yet, but I would say give that a look, because they've got some real scientific based testing that actually backs up their claims. It might be a great product, but I wouldn't condemn POR 15 either, because a lot of times, especially POR 15, we find the biggest problem with POR 15 is you can't clean things up too much because it likes to have sort of some rust and some toothy surface to grab onto, if you clean things up too much, then it tends to, it doesn't seem to adhere as well. Is there one surefire way that's going to work? No. If you're going to drive your car, you're still going to run into cases where some of that stuff, needs to be touched up. I know when my son was working at the Roadster shop, he said the undersides of the cars, they would clean the entire underside of the car and then send them out to a guy that would, Linex the entire underside of the car, which may seem kind of extreme, but, they kind of built their cars to be driven, and they didn't, if you were going to performance drive a car, you don't want to worry about, chipping up the rust, chipping up the frame, and chipping up the paint underneath the car. So they would put on a tough truck liner kind of coating on them. Next, Steve writes in. He saw the video on syringe bleeding a master cylinder, and he asked, if I'm careful, can I reattach the 2 lines quickly? Well, his first thought was, can I syringe bleed the master cylinder in the car? And if I'm careful, reattach the 2 lines quickly, or would that create a bubble in the end of the line at the fitting? Excuse me. Yes, you could theoretically syringe bleed your master cylinder in the car. You'd have to make sure you'd have room for it. It sticks out quite a ways, and not all cars have that much space alongside their master cylinder either way. With that said, even if you can get this, and you could bleed your master in the car, attaching that line without getting some air in there I doubt it could be done because the line is open and there's going to be a little bit of air at the end of the lines. It's not going to be flush with fluid to the end. And by the time you get the line up there and screwed in, you're going to have a little bit of air in there. But bench or syringe bleeding or bench bleeding your master cylinder is not a replacement for bleeding your brake system completely. Your brake system, after you get all the lines back up, then you should flush the lines anyways. See, and it's a good idea just to, bleed out the whole system. Then you don't have to worry about there being any air in there that could give you any trouble where you might have to spongy brake or might have to pump the brakes to get them to actually stop. Okay, Ernest would like assistance. What type of oil and filter should I use in a 1970 Chevelle SS 396? As well as the type and kind of fluids for the rest of the vehicle. Wow, Ernest, this is like, this is a question a lot like, what's better, Ford or Chevy? Which is the best oil? Is it Valvoline or Castrol or, a million other different kinds of oil out there? I'm not ready to make that call. There's a lot of great oils on the market. I think if you have a flat tappet car, I still like to use an oil with a zinc or use an oil with a zinc additive in it. Just because I think, I know they say for brake, you only need it for cam break-in, you need the zinc, but I prefer to have a little zinc in my oil for older engines because I think it avoids a lot of problems that you can have with cam wear, especially on those flat tappet motors. And I do not have any questions in my window. Okay, Diana, she's my remote producer here. She says I have questions in my windows, but I'm not seeing them on my computer. All right, well, we figure that out. Type of oil for the 70 Chevelle SS 396, I'm not going to recommend a particular brand of oil. I would say, choose an oil that has a zinc level to it. I know some guys swear by some of the heavy-duty diesel oils, although they're starting to trim those down too. As far as oil filters, wow, you're into a whole realm of stuff where people, have definitive ideas about, which oil filter is the best. Personally, I like the Napa Golds and the Wix filters and a lot of those. But there's a lot of other good filters out there. It's just what's easiest for me to, the filters I trust and are easy for me to purchase locally, and then. For most of my filters, it's either Wix or the Napa Gold or even some of the Napa Platinum stuff. Is that an endorsement of them? No, it's I think they're good filters. I think most of the Napa filters are made by Wix. I can't say definitively all of them are. I know most of the Gold filters are, so that's what I've always used in the past. But it could go. Pretty much, yes, you can email me the question, yes, email me the question, Diana, I'm sorry. My apologies, we're having a little technical difficulty with the questions coming through on my live feed here. I'm not sure why. It may be a cabling issue. Yes. Yes, it is a cabling issue. How am I going to resolve that real quick? If you will bear with me for just 2 seconds, I am going to try to resolve a problem with that big spool of blue wire that is now missing. Now I've lost my feed completely. Take this end over there. Go, 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 go. Anywhere. All right, I think I'm past that. We were Wi-Fi'd together with my laptop, and apparently my signal wasn't coming in. My apologies. We are now hardwired over. And I have some questions to answer. All right. From my Marvel Mystery Oil, ever notice you can't get a 65 F100 or F250 grill? You can only get a 66 grill. It's possible. You know, I think we run into that all the time with a lot of classic cars, where, you know, you run into a case where, you know, finding reproduction parts isn't always available. You know, if you've ever restored a Mopar, any off brands, you know, some of the Mopars now are getting a lot better, but you know, a lot of the older Mopars, a lot of the off brand stuff, Packards and you know, AMC stuff, you know, a lot of stuff it just isn't available. So you're left finding a good original and restoring that. And yeah, it's a pain, but it can be done. Let's see. Ford should release the first generation Bronco, a basic dead stock, no frills utility that anyone can turn a wrench on and upgrade. Well, you know, there's so many laws nowadays that regulate you know, what new cars would, you know, they couldn't make an old school Bronco anymore, just because, you know, there's so many, you know, airbag laws and all the other rollover protections and everything else. Although there's companies like United Pacific that, where, you know, you can dang near buy every part to build a early Bronco, you know, without having to ever own one. So it, you know, if that's what you're after, you could certainly build it. But, you know, I think the days of building sort of a no frills kind of, you know, commuter car, or, you know, just reliable car are kind of done. But that's not to say that, you know, you can't, I know lots of guys that for their summer cars are driving, you know, 1966s and, you know, old F100s, and they're having a blast driving those cars. And, you know, there's, it's not the mainstream market, but it certainly, a lot of guys enjoy those things. What is the best way you've found to keep water out of your air compressor lines? I do have a buddy that has a heck of a problem keeping water out of his lines, and I remember we were over there, he was painting something one day, and it was like there was, you know, you could see the little solvent bubbles and everything else, and it's like, oh man, you must have water in your tank. And he insisted that he just drained it, but the problem was there was so much rust and scale in the line, even though he could open it up, it would keep all the water from coming out. So we ended up taking his whole compressor apart, and there must have been 2 gallons of water inside of a 20-gallon compressor tank. And yeah, it's an issue. And the way we get rid of it in our shop is a couple different ways. We have an after cooler on, so after the air is pumped out of the compressor pump, it goes through a cooler where it, you know, it condenses the air down, it pulls some of the moisture out, it goes into the main tank. The main tank has an auto drain on it, so every time the compressor runs, at the end of the cycle, for like 5-10 seconds, it will drain the main tank. It will drain any water out. And it will, every time the compressor comes on, shuts off, then it'll drain for 10 seconds, and then it'll shut itself off. So we've never, you know, in all the years that we've had this compressor, we've never had any water issues. However, you know, we did lose our 7.5 horse motor this last week. So yeah, it's not that it's problem free, but at least we've never had problems with moisture either in the tank or, you know, into the lines. And I think there's some things you can do to help prevent getting water in the lines. You know, not everybody's going to have an air compressor that they can put an auto drain on. So, you know, the first thing is to be religious about going over there and, you know, draining your tank regularly. Second thing you can do is, you know, we've plumbed our lines here, and it's all hard lined in with copper pipe. But we go straight up to the ceiling. Well, not straight up, kind of, we do a couple zigs in there. What this does is the air is cooling as it's going up, but it has the, you know, so it goes out of the compressor into a copper line, but there's also a drain tee on that. So as the air is going up, it's cooling, it's condensating, and then the water drips back down into the drip leg, and we can, you know, blast out the lines at the same time. By doing that, we can control the amount of water we get in our, you know, in our lines throughout the system by having some drain tees throughout the shop, and that way, you know, and using copper line, everything cools down quickly. Don't use PVC pipe. You know, I know some guys that use PVC pipe to plumb their garage. PVC, as it ages, it becomes brittle. When it gets brittle, then it explodes. When it explodes, then you know, you have a hazard of shrapnel getting blasted with that, and you don't want that kind of situation where you're getting blasted with all kinds of broken plastic pieces. Okay. What can I do to replicate interior plastic panels for my 76 Volare coupe? Replacements are not produced to my knowledge on the aftermarket. Is there a DIY way to reproduce or restore originals? They are chalky and torn, missing in areas. Yeah, I feel you, Marty. You know, one of the things you can do, you know, what we do on a lot of plastic panels is we'll scrub those down with you get the gray, go to the auto body shop, they have a gray Scotch-Brite that's ultra fine. You know, we use those to kind of get rid of some of the surface oxidation, and then we come back and we'll like use the SEM color coat vinyl dyes, and it's best if you use the cleaners with them. I think we have on the site we've got a thing where we've shown how to you know, how to use the SEM products as far as cleaning and spraying plastic parts to renew them. And I think that's what you can do to renew them. As far as recasting your plastic parts to really achieve a good result, you're probably not going to do that yourself. What I would do, Marty, is, you know, I would look in, you know, those cars are still out there. They're still in salvage yards. I've seen 76 Velaris in vintage salvage yards. They're out there. But I would focus on northern tier. You know, the further north you go, you know, I know here in Minnesota, we always complain we have the most beautiful interiors on classic cars, but the rest of the body has turned into rust. So, you know, we go down to south to find a nice clean body and frame, and then we come back up here, we find a car with a good interior so we can actually get the parts to finally finish it. Because, you know, the southern tier states, you know, those plastic parts are just going to be weathered and chalky and broken and brittle. So that would be my only advice, you know, and still there's going to be, even at that, there's still going to even be some NOS parts out there. I don't imagine Volare parts are drawing top dollar yet, but, you know, in time they will. So now would be the good time to restore one of those before they are bringing the top money. And like I say, check out some of the northern, you know, I know here in Minnesota we got like a handful of vintage salvage yards, and you know, some of those cars you just open them up and it's like the interiors look like they're brand new. So that would be my advice, is time to get out and do a little bit of hunting and enjoy the hobby. Of course, I like the question on the water and the airlines, because the humidity must be 88% in here tonight. We had a big thunderstorm roll through, and right now it is plenty humid in the shop. And of course we can't turn the fans on or anything, because then that'll make too much noise. I have a 57, Ronnie, you've got a 57 Chevy two-door hardtop and want to start restoring it. My question is, should I go back to the original stock or customize it? Your advice, recommendation is appreciated. Good question, Ronnie, and I think a lot of people, you know, struggle with that very same question, you know. You know, certainly your 57 Chevy is a nice car, and you know, it's not so rare. You know, it's not like they only built one or two of them. It's not so rare that you have to feel like you're, you know, desecrating, you know, something that's very unique. But on the other hand, you know, it ultimately comes down to how do you want to enjoy your car. You know, 55 Chevys are great cars. You know, the windshield wipers kind of, you know, if they're still running the original vacuum wipers, they work whenever they want to. If you're still, you know, still running single reservoir master cylinder, you know, to me, it's like, should you modify it or should you restore it? I think there's, you know, I never have a problem telling people with restored cars, if you're going to drive it, you know, fix the safety stuff. Put in a dual reservoir master cylinder. You know, that's just a common sense thing. I know there's going to be guys who will argue with me that, to them, I just say, why don't they put single reservoir master cylinders on new cars? Reason is, it's not as safe. So, my words to that is, make it the car that you want it to be. I can't answer that for you. I can't tell you what you need is a full-on G-Machine custom, or you need a pristine, restored, original, but safe. Make it so the brakes work good and stop you. Make it so, you know, you can rely on it to start, and make sure that the windshield wipers work when you turn them on. And all of those things are, you know, probably more critical than any other aspect of the car. Let's see, having a 65 bear prices are all over the place. And 65, that was the biggest piece of glass ever. You know, like I said, that was the biggest piece of glass ever in production. And design, I still think they get underappreciated. Cars, if it's, you know, you can pretty much name your price. It's like, you know, don't wander in front. All right, apparently coming back up. For whatever reason, maybe it's the human. Next time around, with the whitish coating off, I'm going to have to wrap it up now. Let's see, remove, what are the of new, you know, use, you know, just, you know, not necessarily Windex because there's a lot of ammonia in it, but I use a relative resources, books and videos. Do you recommend available at your fingertips anytime you're at the computer? You had to wait for have something about what you want. You know, stuff. We try to keep it all generic, keep it, and that's the best way to learn. From that, might have something to do with the weather. Thanks for stopping out tonight. I appreciate. Next time we'll resolve some of our technical problems. Thanks again, and Q&A.